back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
You can't always get what you want.
I think we could let this whole song run when it comes to wills and estates and also family law. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you might just find you get what you need. All right. So we have Leah Donaldson here, Senior Associate at McQuarrieHunterLLP, formerly known as?
McQuarrie Hunter.
All right. Well done. When we get into the whole estate side, the will side, and then when you mix in the family law, so people are getting divorced and getting remarried, and there's new children, there's stepchildren. It really does get complicated. Now, what happens with inheritances with spouses, like more than you've been married before and then you have a new one?
Yes. So we see sometimes from the family law perspective, older clients want to come in and leave their children a gift or an inheritance in a will, or it could be an inter vivos gift, which is a gift that they've given during their life. We call it inter vivos. But they're concerned maybe their child's marriage is on the rocks or relationship is on the rocks. So they're concerned that they're going to give this gift and it will get used by this other spouse and not from within their family.
So I'll just paint a story. So you're going to give a kid $100,000 to help buy their first condo.
Exactly.
And they're married.
They're married.
And that's not going well.
It's not going well.
And then they're going to sell that. They're going to break up and they're going to sell that condo, and that $100,000 is going to get half will go to the ex, right?
Well, that's what parents are afraid of.
So what do they do to mitigate that?
Yeah, so they usually come in and talk to us, and we'll explain. So there are different ways you can structure it, which are dependent on the circumstances. But that's another part where I see the family law sort of overlap with estate litigation and inheritance, is because I can sort of give them the family analysis that inheritances are considered excluded property under the Family Law Act. So if you give $100,000 to your son and they keep it separate, or they buy a property with it, but that property is registered in their name only. So they keep it.
Can you paper it and say, I'm buying this with my wife, but this $100,000 was a gift to me? Can you do that?
You can do all kinds of documentation that can indicate what the intention of the parties was at the time. And nothing is guaranteed, but there are safer ways of going about giving gifts or leaving inheritances to your children, especially if you're concerned about a breakdown of a relationship.
And this is a real issue. I know, because so many older, not older, but parents are giving what I called as a living will, giving money to their kids because real estate is so expensive.
Exactly.
And now we're seeing that, and it's actually helping to fuel the real estate market because there's this huge pool of money that young people wouldn't normally have.
No.
And instead of coming, like I have a friend of mine who's a realtor, and she says, you'd be surprised how many young families come in here, 2 little kids, 5 and 4, and they're buying $1 million plus house. Like, where do you get the money?
Subject free.
Yeah. Well, look who's sitting in the car outside. It's mom and dad,
exactly.
right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a huge factor for people. It's their hard-earned money, and they're basically wanting to give it in advance before, not waiting until they pass away. Otherwise, their children won't be able to buy a home.
So the best way to go through that situation is you have mom and dad outside. They're putting the offer in on the house with the kid, and it's a large sum of money. And how do you say to your wife, oh, by the way, this house isn't going to be in our names together. It's only going to be in mine because the money for the down payment came from my parents. Do you have those conversations?
You do. I would say that's a marriage counselor question, but because I do a lot of that in my line of work as well, I would say it's a conversation you have to have because otherwise you'll be having it after the fact when emotions are heated and you're paying a lawyer to help you have that conversation. So I'm of the mind that those uncomfortable conversations, having had them in the relationship, save that grief and that animosity after the fact.
But I guess the explanation to the wife or the husband, if it was the other way around, would be that, this child that's been given the money by the parents is the down payment for the house, but any growth in that house
Yes.
is going to be shared equally with the wife or
correct,
husband,
yes.
right?
So that's the excluded property provision in the Family Law Act. And so you can sort of sit down and plan it out with your family and include your spouse in that conversation to say, I'm receiving this gift. We're going to paper it properly and make sure that even though the property is just going into my name, and that's to protect that exclusion, that you will share in that growth. And that's what the Family Law Act is there for.
So the way to spin it is to say, hey, I've got $500,000 from my parents to buy this house, but if the house goes from $1 million to $5 million, you split the difference,
and they get the benefit of living in the house. I'd say, right?
I don't know. This is sort of like I think the family law thing is stickier than maybe the will side. Do you think that's because are the nerves more raw when it comes to divorce versus wills, or vice versa?
I would say they are. And I think the difference often with estate litigation is that there is a pool of money that's being divided. So often it's a windfall for people.
Sure.
It's not their money that they're dividing. In family law, you're dividing your own money. So there's less money to argue over. There is an economics of litigation analysis to be done. So I always say to clients, if there's $100,000 to get at, but you have to spend $100,000 to get it, well then, it may not be worth that fight. But if you're talking about $1 million, then it changes things. And I think estates just have, it's that windfall. It's that you're getting free money, essentially, that you didn't earn yourself.
And is that generally the case that, wills and estates are from older people who you've collected more money? When you're getting divorced, often you're younger,
yes,
and you just don't have as much stuff,
or you have children. You have more expenses often. So yeah, we do see that. Like I said, the money involved with the family law aspect is lower, and so it's usually a higher concern. The cost of litigation is a bigger concern.
And you're right about the wills and estates. Is that you're going to have to wait it out, but if you had a great uncle that left you some money, well.
Yeah.
You're going to get some money at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So what other things can we talk about when it comes to the two sides of law here for family practice and wills and estates? So they're common mistakes. We talked about, joint ventures.
Yes.
Like homes.
So registering a property into a name with a child. So one thing that it's a common misconception is there's two types of ownership of property, or as well as bank accounts, and that is legal and beneficial. So legal is what's registered. So whose name is on the account, whose name is registered, land title,
right.
Exactly. But there's a second type of ownership, and that is beneficial ownership. And that is who actually contributed to the property. So sometimes we see the overlap of family law and estate litigation in that if parents and children purchased a property together, maybe they're all on title, maybe only a few of them are on title, and one or both of the parents passes away, and there's a divorce, then there's a very sticky sort of situation of assets passing through an estate as well as a divorce where you're separating those assets. So it can be a very complicated accounting of who put what into the property.
Well, I understand that's really common sort of argument, and people go round and round when it comes to holiday homes, cabins and cottages that have been held in families for years. And sometimes I know families that have put the cottage or the cabin into a trust. And then people own shares in it, right?
Yes.
And then who gets to add another person in, and who gets to sell their part? And we have the first right of refusal to buy it off of you. So those family homes that everybody shared the great summer memories at on Galiano Island, for example, that's a hornet's nest, isn't it?
That's funny you should say that, because that's where my family cabin is.
Thanks for the invite.
And that's one of the estate planning tools that Alyssa, who's here earlier, was talking about, is that people do often put them in trusts as a mechanism of keeping them away from spouses' claims. Yeah.
Because I know that you might have this in your family, there's whole calendars. You get 3 weeks in the summer and certain weekends, and you can trade them, but
true.
You don't get more than anybody else.
And there's 5 siblings in my family.
Oh, wow.
So, it's an early booking process.
And so is that the case? It's owned by as a trust? Or
No, absolutely not. No, so that is owned by, and I also come from a blended family. So there's 4 children of my mom, and then my stepdad has 1 child. And so we do the complicating booking process, but it is registered in both of their names.
We'll see if that stays that way. They probably say, Leah, I'll have to have a little question out by the campfire. What are we going to do with this place? And that's the sort of stuff you deal with, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And even though, I mean, we call it estate litigation, it's still a type of family law. It's just not marital. It's not.
You're still dealing with families.
I'm still dealing with families. It's just more sibling dynamics and sibling history. And
okay, I've got a question for you. So we talked about the nerve endings are a little more raw when it comes to a divorce, but who's more emotional overall? Like there's more tears, there's more pulling of the hair. Is it the, like you said, maybe it's because you said it's their money versus money you're going to get for free.
I would say that estate litigation goes on longer. So the feelings are, I think, more deep-seated because they're usually based further back in history.
So the difference is you're married to someone that you met in your 20s or 30s versus you're
that's right.
dealing with your brother and sister you've known your whole life.
You've known them since you were born. So we find that sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And like I said, there's sometimes more money to be spent by people. So it takes them a little longer to get to the point where they're willing to let it go. But definitely more tears in family law.
Now, what about how far back? What's the oldest story you've heard brought up when it comes to wills and estates? When you were 5, do you hear anything like that?
Oh, I hear lower than 5.
Oh, really?
I hear when that sibling was a baby, they got more attention. We have files where children went into care at literally birth, and then later have the ability to claim back against their parents' estate. So these files go back 40 years, 50 years. Yeah.
Never a dull moment for you, is it?
No, not at all. And that's why I find these areas so interesting.
Yeah, it is fascinating, even just to hear it for a short period of time. That's the voice of Leah Donaldson, Senior Associate at McQuarrieLLP, and you're in Surrey, Central Surrey?
Yes, Central City Tower.
I just say it both ways so I get it, make sure I get it right.
Probably a good idea, yeah.
And thank you very much for coming in. It's been very interesting, and we'll continue this conversation about wills and estates and family law on another edition of The Law Show on CL 650. We'll speak to you next time.